3, 4, 5.
Very
Right?
ill, unfortunately.
Okay. So yeah, why don't we go ahead and start our discussion of the TAC? And I wonder, Jonathan, would you be willing to sort of be our co-chair, temporary chair for the day? Get us going?
Sure. Call meeting to order.
Here's Jonathan. Okay,
Should we go around the room or around the Zoom?
yeah, let's go around the room and have everybody introduce themselves. Tracy, why don't you start?
Sure, Tracy Whitehead, Regional Service Coordinator for Manchester Transit Authority. And
Nancy Michaels, Dairy Londonderry Chamber.
Jillian Harris, Town of Bedford.
Zach Swick, the commission. Carl Epic with the commission. Nate Miller, staff.
Ben Herbert, SNHPC and Region 8 Mobility Manager. Jonathan Golden, City of Manchester. Adam Leisman with the commission. Jameson, DOT.
And Sylvia Von Alnock with the SNHPC. And let's go to our virtual group. Tammy.
Zamoyski, SNHPC.
Thanks, Tammy. And Tim?
Tim White, New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services Air Resources Division.
Thanks, Tim. Andrew?
Andrew Haddock, Town of Chester.
Mark?
Mark Sunan, Town of New Boston.
Kristen?
Kristen Clark, City of Manchester.
And Lee?
Lee Levine, Federal Highways.
And I don't know who SNHPC is. Is that you, Adam, or who's that?
Might be Kevin.
Kevin? Kevin is, are you on? Somebody is under SNHPC. A mystery SNHPC. Let's keep going to Linda.
Hi, Linda Westcott, NHDOT.
And I'm sure that's Nicholas. Maybe he stepped away. And Jessica?
Good morning, Jessica Wilcox, DES with Tim.
Thanks, Jessica. Good to have you here. And we have someone on the phone ending in 4117. If you hit *6, I believe you can tell us who you are. Or keep it a secret. All right, so we have 2 mystery guests.
To review notes from September.
Kevin is logged in as SNHPC.
That's Kevin.
Mhm.
All right.
Mystery
thank you.
solved.
That mystery solved. He's just very shy. Is that it? Kevin. So Kevin is our traffic counter extraordinaire. All right.
So maybe these are notes instead of minutes because it wasn't a quorum as well.
Yes, we have notes. So we can review the note, but if anyone has any additions for notes, oh, and we have Fred that just got here. That gives us 6 in-house. Not yet. Mhm. Anyone have any changes for the notes?
I wasn't here for this, so I can't comment.
All right. I don't hear anything. Now we're ready.
Move on.
Yeah.
Okay. New business.
Let's see if I can get you set up here, Tom.
Twenty 2023 New Hampshire DOT CMAQ funding opportunity.
So you can do the display settings.
I want duplicate. And it wasn't on duplicate a minute ago. That wasn't. Okay.
I don't know why it does that.
Duplicate slideshow.
And it doesn't want to do it. Let's try this again. Oh, this might work. Can everybody see full screen Tom's cover slide?
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
If you could pass these out.
Yeah, sure. And is it just the down arrow to?
Yeah, you can actually right or left arrow to go.
Right or left? Yeah. Okay, great. Everybody, all right, good morning, everybody. Tom Jameson with the New Hampshire DOT first. I'm a project manager, but I also manage the transportation alternative program and the congestion mitigation air quality program. So that's what we're presenting today. We have started a new round of CMAQ solicitation. So basically, that's my presentation will be kind of what we're planning to do, you know, kind of the program, just a very basic 10,000-foot overview. How about this? Smart.
The arrows might be easier.
Yeah, they're not, they don't seem to be working.
Oh, they're not?
No.
Let's try this. Yeah, that worked.
How'd you do that? Okay, thanks, Nate.
Yep.
All right, so the CMAQ program, it's under the new infrastructure improvement bill, or the IIJA, we call it. We have decided, we did this with the transportation alternatives, we're doing it with the CMAQ, is we're aligning it with our 10-year plan process. So we're gonna do 4 years of funding for each program, so that they align every 2 years. We'll do TAP, then we'll do CMAQ. So that we're doing $30 million to award versus what we typically do around 15. So we're doubling the amount for 4 years. So we're not really doubling the amount, but we're doing 4 years of funding. Also, we've increased the the maximum to, we used to limit you on how much you could apply for. We're suggesting now a maximum of 3 million. Projects are all going up. Projects that used to cost 700,000, we're seeing they're like $1 million, $1.5 million. So this will hopefully, you know, get good projects, but not take the entire 30 million in one shot. So we're recommending 3 million. Still 80-20, 20% match. Okay, the eligible activities really haven't changed since the last round. You know, we're looking for anything that's going to improve air quality. We're seeing a lot more bike and pedestrian projects. One thing that has changed from way back, we're in a maintenance state now, so we can use CMAQ anywhere from Pittsburgh down to Nashua. So it's not just buses and that. We see park and rides. We've seen a lot of signal coordination projects. That seems to be very important in the cities. We're also seeing roundabouts, you know, just different projects coming in. Bottom line is it has to meet 2 criteria. It has to be transportation related and improve air quality. So those are really the 2 main focuses.
Tom, can I just ask one clarifying question, because we get this a lot?
Yeah.
People have rail trail projects. We have a couple that can be proposed, even in this 10-year plan cycle, filling in gaps on a rail trail. Is the distinction the department looks for on a project like that determines whether or not it's quote unquote recreational versus non-recreational?
It just has to serve a transportation feature element. So if you can honestly say someone's going to commute to work, someone's going to maybe take a trip to a store, someone's going to use it, even if it's a destination, I think it's eligible. You know, what we can't do is, you know, basically a 1 out, 1 back, you know, sort of a recreational loop back. But if it connects this street to this street, and you can make the case that people are going to use that on their commuting, it'd be eligible. Okay. And just like Nate, ask questions. This is really informal. You know, more of a dialogue would be great. So stop me at any time. So what are we really looking for from the regional planning commissions? We're looking for obviously everyone, especially the TACs, to sort of see what you have out there for projects. You know, we'd like to have a lot of interest, to have a lot of applications come in. We want, you know, the Regional Planning Commission can help you understand air quality, what it is to have an air quality benefit. They're going to help hopefully with scope of work, understand estimates. We need to have better estimates than we got in the past. And then they're going to assist with the air quality analysis. So every planning commission, they'll get the projects in their regions. They'll help to develop the air quality analysis. So don't let that scare off potential applicants that we don't know how to do air quality. They're here to help. DOT is there to help. And then finally, if, hopefully every planning commission will get multiple applications, they will help to rank them. So it will have basically what the highest priority is for each planning commission region. So the process that we're going to follow is we've been kind of doing this right along, so it won't be a mystery, but first step would be to prepare a letter of interest. We're in that phase right now. So what we want is communities to basically, you think you have a project, you want to send in a letter, basic description of your scope of work. A map is really helpful for us to kind of see where you're planning. What you think this meets for eligibility, because that helps us vet projects. So if right off the bat we see that, this is not going to be eligible, we want to make sure before you go and fill out an application only to be denied, and then you can maybe rethink another project or tweak your project to be eligible. And then really important too, we want a contact person and a good email. We're doing everything since COVID. It's just very easy to do everything through computer and email. So, we need a really good email address because we're going to be reaching out to everybody with those letters for step 2, which we'll get to now. So step 2, we're going to hold a workshop. We'll do it virtually. That way, anywhere in the state, we'll make it very simple. And in this workshop, it's more involved than what I'm giving you now, but it's going to be similar. It's basically to say what the CMAQ program is, kind of how to manage a federal project. You don't just get the money, you can't just take it, put it in the bank and do what you want. A lot of rules, a lot of things you have to follow. What that does is it kind of limits. Some communities are not ready and they realize that, we're not ready for this. So that's part of this. And then we also go through the application. So if people have started looking at the application, they're confused, we can vet that. So really what it is, we now have the pool of people who think they want to apply. Then we kind of go through steps and how to apply. And then the submission, and we've done this previously, because applications tend to get very big. We do it through our FTP site. Most times you can't just email applications in because you have pictures, supporting documentation. So we go through a tutorial on how to do the FTP site. We're going to have tutorial on our website, and then hopefully all the planning commissions use our FTP sites all the time. They can definitely guide applicants through that process. And to make it simple, I've actually created a separate page just for CMAQ. So it'll be very easy for somebody to go in. They won't get confused as to where to go. And then step 3 is to submit the application to us. We've been pretty clear right from the start. You have to have sent in a letter of interest, and you have to have attended our virtual workshop to then submit the application. And we do this for a lot of reasons because, we want to make sure that people understand the program, people understand that we know that your potential project is going to be eligible. And we have looked at the costs to say, we think your costs are reasonable as well. So it really helps us in the end to have people meet those criteria. Schedule, Nate, I think you've passed out a schedule to everybody. So if we take a quick look at the schedule, we released the announcement on September 26th. We're in October right now. We have not actually released the application
We're working on it. The application is going to be a PDF form. So applicants will take the form, they'll fill out the form and save it. And we'll go through this also in our workshop, but you know, the key is they need to save it as a form. They can't then print it and then scan it. It doesn't work, because what happens is we take all the information from the application, harvest it, it all goes into a database. So we can then easily manipulate the information. So that will all be explained. So that's going to be coming out soon. November 4th, letters of interest are due. We're asking people to email them, and it's in our guidance. Goes to myself and to one of our program support people, Jody. So then we will log you in. We will send you, we want to make sure your email works. We'll send you something saying, you know, thank you for whatever. That way we have a back and forth. Because then what will happen is everybody who is submitted will then get the information on the workshop emailed to them. You know, when it's going to be, it'll either be Zoom or Teams. Probably I'm leaning more towards Zoom, but we're gonna hopefully have all 9 planning commissions involved. If they want to attend this workshop, that'd be great. They can kind of sit in on it. So that happens in December. January applications are due January 6th. You know, it's after Christmas and New Year's. You know, unfortunately, people always wait till the end. You know, I always tell people try to get them in early, but you know, more than likely they're all going to come in on the January 5th and 6th. So my assumption is most people take a lot of vacation before and not after. So hopefully that won't hurt anybody. It's also electronic, so you could be anywhere in the country, submit your application. You don't have to drive it in. Okay, then we're going to take those applications in. We review them both for eligibility. We review them for costs. We take a good look at them. We will then sort them all, send them all out to the planning commissions. So you'll receive those in early or mid-January. And then these are very vague, you know, these aren't exacts now, but February sometime, start looking at the air quality. Probably before that happens, the department will get all the planning commissions together to discuss air quality, you know, what we're going to use to determine the air quality. We want everybody to be on the same page. So, you know, there's the guidance documents, there's Federal Highway has a lot of tools, and we'll be doing that to make sure we're all using the same tools. March, air quality will hopefully finish up. Regional planning commissions will rank their projects. DOT then convenes a scoring committee, and then we will rank the projects. And we typically will use the RPC rankings as one of our criteria for scoring. So we don't score that internally. That's just given points. And then our scoring committee does their thing. We'll get a list of projects from 1 to whatever, and then we'll go down and see how far we can get with funding. And then all that goes to commissioner for approval. Commissioner will then incorporate that into the draft 10-year plan. Hopefully by spring, summer of 2023. It's important to know this funding is really for, and that's important for applicants to know, it's for 25, 26, you know, it's starting in fiscal 25. So don't want to discourage them. Want them to apply, want them to make sure they get in the program. But if they think they're going to start a project next summer, you know, that's not going to happen.
So no engineering phase work prior to fiscal 25.
Correct. That's what this funding is targeting. So, and that's October of 24.
Tom, I have 2
Fiscal
questions
25.
for you.
Yep.
So for our communities, let's give an example. So Hooksett, we have we have Nicholas Williams. Bruce Thomas is the engineer. Let's say Bruce Thomas sends the letter of intent, but he can't make it to the workshop. Can Nicholas Williams be the representative at the workshop?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay,
It's somebody
just
from
someone
the
from that
organization.
community. Okay.
Correct.
And then second question, the scoring and ranking, the criteria, is that same criteria as last go round, or is that going to be developed again?
I could say about, right now, about 95% will be about the same. We haven't finalized it. It hasn't been approved yet.
Okay,
I don't think it'll be much different than the last round.
okay. And when will that be determined?
Hopefully, it'll be this month. I can't tell you exactly when. My hope would be probably sometime next week. We're getting towards the end, middle to end of October. And I
Okay.
didn't mention this, but it's very important that the letter of interest is not binding. So you could put a letter of interest in and say, we want to do signal coordination. Then you go, actually, we really want to do sidewalks instead. That's okay. You've got that letter in. You can change, in mid-course. You want to tell us, to say, well, we're interested in doing something different. But you're not bound to what that letter goes in.
So the letter can be vague.
The letter can be vague. We're hoping that it will be, what you're really interested in, but it's not, because I've had that happen where there might be 2 or 3 projects, they don't really know, and they go, do we have to put letters in for all 3 projects? And it's like, no, put one in for the one you think you really want. But then if it changes, if your community gets together and says, we don't want this one, that's fine. Once the application's in, it's set. So, but up to that point, it's just a placeholder. So we know you're interested, and we can start to work. So then they can also start communicating with us if they have questions like, if you have a project that you're intending to do on a state road, you need to make sure you've talked to the district engineer first, make sure they're on board before you go to all that trouble. You get your project only to have the district say, we can't support this project because, so, those are the kind of things, communication that's good to have during that application process.
Tom?
Yeah.
Is the department open to funding more than one project in the community? Or is there a limit of one project per community?
I think the answer right now is it depends on how many apps we get. If we get in, if we still had money left, obviously we'd say sure. But if we got in so many applications that, we could barely fund, what we had, we probably would say, you need to pick your best, but we really can't say until we get in, see what we get in.
Should these funds be used if there's already federal funding for the project?
Well, it depends what your question
So
is.
I sat through a meeting last night about the ADA accessible pedestrian bridge over Granite Street as part of the race grant. I suspected that it would probably cost more than what they had budgeted for. Is it possible to leverage these funds as well?
You could, as long as it's an eligible project. I mean, you can't match federal with federal, but you can, we a lot of times HSIP and CMAQ together, TAP and TE together. So you could, I don't know if you'd be as competitive maybe, because you've already got some funding, and other places might say we don't have anything, but I don't see any rule that would specifically say you can't do that. We had earmarks sometimes to our projects, same kind of thing. Yeah. Just make sure it's transportation and it will provide the air quality benefit.
Sorry.
So if you have multiple projects, would you be open to multiple applications then?
Yeah.
Be under-
Yeah, I think so. I think, CMAQ with the $30 million, that we're saying is available. The other thing I think we would look at is if you put in 2 projects that were $500,000 each versus 2 $3 million projects, I don't think we really want to make that decision. I think we need to look at everything. But I do think if, we wouldn't want to see a community get 3 projects and then a bunch of them denied projects too.
Right.
So I think we'd have to take a look at what we get in for the apps. And the other thing is if you, let's say you have multiple applications, doesn't mean they're all gonna get funded. You know, one could be number 1 and one could be number 50.
Questions from our virtual audience?
Yeah,
Any?
hi, Tom, it's Tim.
Hey, Tim?
Just curious, Tom, is the department planning on pulling together a meeting of the CMAQ Advisory Committee?
I do not know. I'd have to check with Bill Watson on that.
Okay, thank you.
And actually, can we go back to Tim for a second? Tim,
Yeah, hi, Tom. Yep.
you know, we still have like the charging stations. Have you heard anything on any movement on waivers for that?
Yeah, I mean, there's information out there now on what Federal Highways is proposing for a waiver process. There was they put together a notice of information that they had in the Federal Register. And I mean, they suggested a process in there. So we're trying to find out as much as we can about that in an effort to keep that project moving.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, we had a couple last round of electric charging stations that we can't fund at this point because there's no waiver process for Buy America.
Lee Levine?
Yeah, hi, everybody. Thanks, Tom. Great presentation as always. My question is about match requirements from communities. And I think in particular, with the way the program's structured now, looking out 4 years ahead, is the department, I guess, what have you thought about that in terms of how you want to demonstrate a committed match from applicants, particularly for those projects that are, out there in the future, looking at future years?
No, I don't think it will change much because, as you know, a lot of communities don't start projects for a couple of years from when the application round is. It is a little further out. But I think we're looking for commitments, obviously, from communities, that they're going to, if it's a small community, they're going to take it to their voters. If it's a larger community, the city council will weigh in on it. And then obviously, if, some communities have budgeted for projects and, they may have it, already. So I don't think it will really affect too much, even though it's a little bit further out than we typically see.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And then there's Mark from New Boston.
Thanks, Tom. So just a clarification question. You said that that a community can submit multiple. So what I want to clarify is if a community, let's say they have 4 projects that they're thinking about, but they know they absolutely want to submit 2. Does that mean they need to submit 2 separate letters of interest because they're going to go after 2?
No, really, I like I was saying, I would pick the one you really want the most and put that in as your letter of interest. You could mention it in your letter, that we have another project as well. But really, I would focus on your number 1 because even if you submit 2, we would want you to make them, what you think is your top priority. So if we do have to say, we really have to look at one per community, we'll have at least your number 1.
Okay. And then a follow-up second question at the back end. Nuts, I just had it. All right, I'll think of it. I'll come back.
Jess Wilcox?
Yes, thank you so much. I just have 2 hopefully quick clarifying questions, Tom. One is just wanted to confirm, can private businesses operating in New Hampshire also apply for CMAQ funding? And 2, I didn't see it on the list of eligible projects, but would like an educational event highlighting clean transportation outreach to the public be something that would qualify as a project as well?
the first question you have is yes, we've done projects with Stonyfield Yogurt. We still have to follow the federal rules. If they were to purchase, say, an electric vehicle, you know, federal highway is gonna look at the lifespan of that vehicle. You know, so if they do purchase a vehicle, they can't turn around and sell it next year. They have to keep it for a certain amount of time, but yeah, we have done projects with private entity. Your second question is more of a policy question, which I'd have to get back to you on. I'm not sure. I know with TAP, we have focused in on infrastructure. There's such a need in the state. I think we would probably do the same with CMAQ, but I don't want to say specifically today because I don't have that answer.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah, without the water, sorry, what am I saying? Water quality, without the air quality component.
Well, it is eligible to do some outreach.
Okay.
I'm not sure how they do the air quality on those, but again, we'd have to decide. You know, infrastructure just seems to be such an important piece
Right.
in our state.
Right. Mark has his hand up again.
Yeah, I figured out what I was going to ask before. You mentioned that this is 4-year money, that you're doing 30 million instead of the 15 for a 2-year cycle. Does that mean that the next round of open applications for CMAQ will be 4 years from now, or are you looking to do another round in 2 years?
No, what we're doing is we're putting them, aligning them with a 10-year plan. So this 10-year plan will be CMAQ, and the next 10-year plan will be TAP, and then the next 10-year plan will be CMAQ. So it would be a full 4 years before we get to another CMAQ round.
Got it.
2 years from now, we'll start a TAP round.
Okay.
4 years. So they'll be around every 10-year plan will be a funding round, but they'll offset back and forth between CMAQ and TAP.
And they'll each be a 4-year funding scenario.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
As long as we continue to have funding.
We had 2 people join us, Kelly Walsh online from Londonderry and Linda Kuhnhart from Francistown. Didn't know if you 2 had any questions.
Certainly.
No problem. Oh, and we also have Craig Tufts.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I guess 1 or 2 more quick ones. We get questions periodically from advocates that would like to know if the capital cost of certain micro mobility projects would be eligible, the capital cost of bicycle share program or the capital cost of a scooter program. Has the department considered any? I think it is federally eligible. I don't know the department's eligible activities, but what would your thoughts be on that?
We'd have to find more out about it, I think if it's similar to, something that's going to get people out doing transportation, we would definitely consider it. If it's just advocacy of get people bike riding.
No, this would be actually purchasing bike share stations and bicycles.
Yeah.
I don't know that we'll see an application like that. We do regularly hear from some advocates that are interested in working with their communities to pursue CMAQ applications for things like bicycle share capital investments.
Yeah, I think we
Actual stations and bicycles.
Yeah, I think we would take a good look at it. We'd have to see a lot more info on it. Yeah, but I wouldn't rule it out.
On transit operating, there were some changes in terms of the actual, the use of CMAQ funds. There were changes in the IIJA affecting the use of CMAQ funds for transit operations. There used to be a particular sunset on how long CMAQ can participate in it. What's the department's policy on that in this? If a transit provider applied to operate a new route using CMAQ funds as operating funds for that route, would there be a sunset on that? And what would that be?
I don't have that answer right now. What we've done at the department is we've sort of broken off transit to Rail and Transit Bureau. Fred, can't think of his last name right now. Butler. Yeah. He kind of manages that program, so we'd have to discuss it with him.
Okay.
You know, we did want to open up the round to include transit, but all those projects get funneled to them because it goes to FTA to be administered. So I can definitely ask Fred what position will be on that.
Okay.
Any other questions from the group, virtual participants or anyone in the room? Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.
All right.
2025, 2034 10-year plan.
All right.
Take care, Tom.
Thanks a lot.
Some automatic.
Yeah. All right. So it's on duplicate. Okay.
All right. Can everybody see full screen on Zoom?
Yes.
All right. Not any of that presenter mode or whatever.
Nope, it's perfect.
Okay, great. I've never used presenter mode in my life, and
No.
somehow it wants to default to that every time. So I'm going to walk through some fairly significant updates about the 10-year plan process and where we're at with 10-year plan project evaluations and the like. Everybody has seen this slide before. I show it every time because we talk about a lot of different types of transportation plans and programs, and it's always important to understand how they fit together. So we are talking about the 10-year plan today. The 10-year plan is a state requirement, not a federal requirement. The federal requirements are our Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which looks out 20+ years, and our Transportation Improvement Program, which is looking out 4 years. In New Hampshire, something is considered to have a funding commitment when it's in the 10-year plan. So in a lot of cases, the Transportation Improvement Program is essentially the first 4 years of the 10-year plan. So once something advances into the 10-year plan, there is a funding commitment there. And that's what makes the 10-year plan process important in our state. Our regional allocation here for the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission region has historically been about $8.5 million. Fortunately, with the increase in federal formula funding that the state as a whole is receiving through the IIJA, we are seeing a proportional increase in the amount of our regional allocation. So our regional allocation in this 10-year plan cycle is expected to be $10.56 million. And that $10.56 million is not in 2022 dollars. All of the projects that we put in the plan will go at the end of the plan. So in the end of the plan, the final 2 years of the plan, in this case, are fiscal year 23 and 24. So whatever we're funding in this 10-year plan update gets scheduled for construction in either fiscal year 23 or 33 or 34. And as a result, we need our $10.56 million is actually based on year of expenditure for the year that is programmed. So if a project gets programmed for construction in 2033, that would entail 9 years of inflation on today's costs to reach that year of expenditure cost. So unfortunately, inflation is going to consume a more significant portion of our $10.56 million in this cycle than we've seen it in the past, just because of what's happening with inflation nationally. So that's just important to remember. We're not talking about $10.56 million in 2022. We're talking about $10.56 million in the year of expenditure. So New Hampshire DOT requires engineering review of all projects that are proposed for inclusion in the 10-year plan, both for scope and cost estimation purposes. We talked about this briefly last time, but Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission did do a process, a qualifications-based selection process and selected VHB to serve as our on-call engineering firm for the next 2 years. We had 7 projects, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, and I introduced at a previous meeting. And we were able to assign all 7 projects to VHB for scoping and cost estimating. So those draft scoping memos and cost estimates have been developed. I'll highlight, walk through some of the highlights for each project in a minute. We're still reviewing and making some tweaks to those scopes and cost estimates, but we're making good progress, as you'll see momentarily. I'm going to start in alphabetical order by community and walk through kind of what we've learned so far about our 7 candidate projects. The first project in the town of Bedford is Route 101 safety improvements from Wallace Road to the Amherst town line. This is the town of Bedford's #1 priority for inclusion in the 10-year plan. It would be based on the kind of continued implementation of the 2002 corridor study of Route 101. And there have been other implementation projects of this particular corridor study of Route 101. Some are happening right now that are managed by New Hampshire DOT in other parts of the corridor. Amherst and Milford, I believe, are the 16392D and E projects respectively. There was recently a significant capacity improvement on 101 in Bedford from Route 114 to Wallace Road. That was one of the items that came out of this corridor study. So there's a continued effort amongst all 4 communities along the 101 corridor in this area to continue implementing this 2002 corridor study. So the corridor study from 2002 proposes a 5-lane cross section, basically along the entire segment here from Wallace Road to the Amherst town line. And for our purposes here, the project would begin at the recently completed widening project, which ended around Wallace Road and would continue on to the west. VHB estimates this project to cost $19.7 million in today's dollars. So obviously, this is not something that we have the ability to completely fund, even if it was the #1 project in the region in this cycle. We don't have the resources available to completely fund this project. So based on some studies that New Hampshire DOT is finalizing right now about safety issues along the corridor, the segment from Wallace Road to Elk Drive is the highest priority segment in this area from a safety perspective. So we're going to ask VHB to break out a specific cost for the Wallace to Elk segment. There's another kind of complicating factor with this in that farther in the western segment of the portion of this area, the 101 bridge over Pulpit Brook was widened to 3 lanes in 2022 and has no accommodation for a future 5-lane cross section as envisioned in the corridor study. So the segment from Elk Drive to the Amherst town line may ultimately require a different cross section given the constraint of that bridge, which was literally just constructed at a 3-lane width. So these are, some moving parts that need to be considered here. I have sent VHB scoping memo for all of these to the key municipal stakeholders, but for this one in particular, I also sent it to Jason Ayotte at New Hampshire DOT, who is the project manager for other safety improvement projects happening in the 101 corridor, and we've been working as VHB to scope some of those projects, and we want to make sure that what's proposed here meshes with the department's approach on other sections of the 101 corridor. Second project in Bedford is a construction of a multi-use path adjacent to Route 101 from Wallace Road to the Amherst town line, kind of in the same area we were just talking about. This would be a 10-foot wide paved multi-use path along Route 101 with 2-foot gravel shoulders. So the total kind of width of the project is about 14 feet. This project is estimated to cost $3.1 million in today's dollars. The 101 bridge that was recently constructed over Pulpit Brook doesn't have an accommodation for a future multi-use path. So the bridge would either need to be widened, which would be quite expensive, or potentially a separate prefabricated pedestrian bridge next to that bridge would need to be constructed to truly have a separated multi-use path in this area. So that's some future design issues to consider if this project is ultimately included in the 10-year plan. In the town of Deerfield, this is the intersection of Route 107, Candia Road and Church Street. The town of Deerfield may remember this from 2 years ago. The town of Deerfield asked that we continue considering this in the 10-year plan. So we did assign this to VHB to update their cost estimate. This is a roundabout conversion project. It's a 4-lane roundabout, although not in the traditional 4-lane or 4-leg roundabout layout that you're used to. So there's, it's a interesting project to make a geometrically challenging set of roads more functional. Total project cost is estimated to be $1.557 million in 2022 dollars, actually lower than the cost estimate from 2 years ago. So that was a nice surprise from VHB. The design that VHB has come up with does try to minimize, if this is kind of the center of Deerfield Village area, there are a number of historic properties. It does try to minimize impact to those properties, but would still have some impacts to a couple of properties, including the removal of some very nice old growth trees at one particular property on 107. So again, we'll see what comes out of this, but the cost estimate going down from 2 years ago was unexpected. So Town of Londonderry submitted 2 projects, submitted four projects. We had the ability to scope and get cost estimates for their top 2. Their first one is, their top priority is a capacity increase on Route 28 from the intersection of Sims Drive and Vista Ridge Drive to the intersection of Route 128. If you recall from previous 10-year plan cycles, we do have a significant intersection improvement project that is in the 10-year plan and now fully funded at the intersection of 28 and 128 in Londonderry. This would start where that project ends and continue on to the intersection of Sims Drive and Vista Ridge. This would expand Route 28 to a 5-lane cross section with a dual use center turn lane. The intersection itself of Vista Ridge and Sims Drive does include additional turn lanes and through lanes, which VHB acknowledges may be excessive. So you can't really tell from this photo, but in one of the directions, there are directions on 28, there are 7 lanes at the intersection, 3 throughs, 2 rights and 2 lefts. And in the other direction, there are 6 lanes. It is quite a capacity expansion to do that to this intersection. So VHB does kind of put a caveat in their scoping memo that lane use should be reevaluated if this advances into the 10-year plan once the design phase formally begins. Total project cost is estimated to be $9.7 million in 2022 dollars. Again, this is kind of at the amount where, after you consider, even if this was the #1 project in the region to fund in the 10-year plan, we would not be able to fully fund it given inflation out to the year of expenditure. So normally a project of this size would potentially lend itself to phasing. However, because most of the benefits accrue to that Vista Ridge and Sims Drive intersection, a phased version of the project may not actually provide tangible benefits. So it's something for us to consider as we're evaluating this project. Really, you kind of essentially need to do the entire project to accrue benefits. Second project in Londonderry is the construction of phase 7, which is the final segment, the most southerly segment of the Londonderry Rail Trail from Route 28 to the Dairytown line. This would involve a 10-foot wide paved rail trail with 2-foot gravel shoulders. Right here, if you can see where my cursor is a crossing of Route 28. And it's a busy area, and the crossing is not particularly simple. So this would actually, this crossing would likely necessitate kind of the highest form of pedestrian crossing, which is called a pedestrian hybrid beacon. It's actually kind of essentially a red light, user activated red light, which is a more significant and expensive form of crossing treatment, given the level of traffic and the width of Route 28 in this area. There's also a bridge crossing of Beaver Brook. The abutments are there, and the VHB's proposal is to use the existing abutments to install concrete deck panels to support the trail over Beaver Brook, rather than building a new structure from scratch. You know, their initial assessment is that the existing abutments should likely hopefully be able to be reused for an improved bridge crossing. Total project cost for this project is estimated to be $641,000 in 2022 dollars. In my review of the cost estimate, I think we're going to have some conversations with VHB to ensure their level of confidence in that estimate. It does seem a little bit low given a potential pedestrian hybrid beacon and at the 28 crossing. So this could end up going up a little bit, but their initial estimate is $641,000. The southern portion of this rail trail segment, the actual ultimate design of the southern portion of this is going to be dependent on how across the town line in Derry, how the rail trail segment being completed as part of the Route 4A project or Exit 4A project ends up, the final alignment will need to match. So VHB kind of leaves the final alignment of the southern section a little bit fuzzy, dependent on the Exit 4A rail trail conclusion. This project is a good fit for the TAC program, and potentially based on what we heard from Tom Jameson today, if we can make some connections that would demonstrate value of this particular rail trail segment to a non-recreational transportation purpose, then it could be something that the town could apply for as a CMAQ project. The benefit of applying for it as a CMAQ project would be if it got funded as a CMAQ project, you're going to construction in somewhere between fiscal 25 and fiscal 29 rather than either 33 or 34. So that's something that we can talk with the town about and see if they're interested in potentially pursuing this as a CMAQ project if we can demonstrate a non-recreational transportation purpose for it. And the town, if they did apply for CMAQ, they'd be somewhat ahead of the game because we've got the scoping memo and cost estimate prepared and have done quite a bit of homework already on this. Same thing for going back to the Bedford multi-use path. At $3.1 million, it's a little bit above the $3 million limit of the CMAQ program, but perhaps we could discuss with the town of Bedford whether or not they would be interested in pursuing this, maybe breaking it up into phases and pursuing a phase 1 of this as a CMAQ project, because this again, if we can demonstrate a non-recreational component to this pedestrian and bicycle improvement, which I think we can, it would be potentially eligible for CMAQ funding and could be constructed on a far more accelerated timeline than going to the back of the 10-year plan and waiting 10 years for the project to advance forward. So both the Bedford and the Londonderry projects may have potential in the CMAQ program. Next up is the Exit 8 Wellington Road interchange improvements in the city of Manchester. Many of you may remember this project from 2 years ago. It remains the city of Manchester's top priority for inclusion in the 10-year plan. This is There are kind of three components to this project. One is adaptive signal control and signal coordination for, I think, 4 signals along Wellington Road in this area, combined with some intersection capacity improvements, combined with some bicycle lane improvements through this section. So we did assign this to VHB. There were a couple of technical updates that we asked VHB to incorporate based on comments received from the city, and update the cost estimate as well. So the total project cost estimate for this project is estimated to be $8.226 million in 2022 dollars. That is, you know, kind of the three components of that project to give you a sense of how that 8.2 million is comprised. The signal coordination, adaptive signal control portion of the project is about $980,000. The bicycle lane costs $3.75 million. Not easy to, you know, not necessarily inexpensive to do bicycle lanes in this particular area. And the intersection capacity improvement portion of the project would be just under $3.5 million. So there may be a potential for this project to lend itself to phasing by either doing the signal coordination or signal coordination plus intersection capacity improvement components of the project first and the bicycle lane second, or vice versa. That could be a way of potentially phasing the project, because with inflation, I'm not sure we would be able to fund the entire 8.2 million, even if this was the #1 regional project. Once you're talking about inflation of the year of expenditure, it's unlikely we'd be able to fund even this entire project. So we may need to get, if this becomes a high priority, we may need to get creative in how to potentially phase or fund a portion of the project. Lastly, in the town of Windham, improvements to the Wyndham Greenway from Meeting House and Old Mill Road to the westerly right-of-way of Interstate 93. So this is a 2.27 mile section of the Wyndham Greenway. It's an abandoned railroad right now. And would basically, the improvement would be to convert it into a 10-foot wide paved multi-use path. So the town-owned portion of the Wyndham Greenway ends here at the westerly right-of-way of Interstate 93. There is a segment on east of 93 that is a state-owned portion, but town-managed, that connects to the Fremont branch of the Rockingham Rail Trail. And so this project is estimated to cost $1.457 million in 2022, but that cost only includes improvements to the town-owned portion of the trail, that 2.227 miles that goes to the westerly right-of-way of I-93. We do think that there are going to be some improvements needed on the east side of 93 on that state-owned section of trail to actually make a safe connection to the Fremont branch of the Rockingham Rail Trail. And that may include a pedestrian hybrid beacon, like we talked about for the Londonderry project, a pedestrian hybrid beacon at the Lowell Road crossing east of 93. So I think what we're going to do is ask VHB to estimate the costs that are needed east of 93 to get a total sense of what actually a true safe connection to the Fremont branch of the Rockingham Rail Trail would be, and then go from there. A sense on kind of next steps is we are in right now, as you see in progress, we are continuing to work with our colleagues at VHB on an engineering review of these projects. The next milestone that we have in this process is to submit a quote unquote short list of regional candidate projects to New Hampshire DOT on November 10th. So what we're going to do is work with VHB over the coming couple of weeks to refine these project scopes and cost estimates. We may get comments back from some of our municipal stakeholders. We certainly have some comments internally, and we're going to work with VHB to kind of finalize the scope and cost estimates for the projects over between kind of probably now and the end of October or first few days of November. On November 10th, that initial submission of project candidates, what we would call a short list of projects, is due to New Hampshire DOT. So what we're going to do is we do have a TAC evaluation subcommittee that is comprised of George Sioris, Mark Sunin, and Linda Kuhnhart. They all represent communities that don't have active 10-year plan project applications. And we're going to work with them to do an initial evaluation of the projects according to our regional criteria. But that's not going to by any means be a final set of priorities. That's going to be the initial look. At this point, we're not, we are at Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission considering all 7 of the projects to be viable 10-year plan candidates. So we're going to submit those engineered scopes and cost estimates for all 7 of those projects to New Hampshire DOT, along with our initial understanding of how they may fit with the project evaluation criteria. So that will be how we meet our shortlist requirement. We were fortunate to be able to actually scope and get cost estimates for every project we've talked about today. So we're gonna send those to DOT and ask for their comments on them as well. Our actual final set of regional priorities, which will be constrained to our $10.56 million regional allocation, is due to New Hampshire DOT by no later than March 31st of 2023. So we've been kind of working through this engineering review process, getting a handle on the cost estimates, getting a handle on the scope details of these different projects, and now we'll be starting to move into the project evaluation phase and seeing how the different projects meet all of the regional criteria for our 10-year plan. But no final decisions are going to be made until the late winter, early spring, in advance of that March 31st timeline. Any questions? I know I just walked through a lot of stuff in a fairly short period of time, but I will stop here, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. Zach.
I just wanted to point out that the Wyndham Greenway Trail also connects to the Wyndham Rail Trail and the Grand State Corridor as well.
I forget how they get from the east side to the west side.
There's a box culvert.
Yeah,
Yes. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Nate, just a clarification. So you made very clear in the first couple of slides, the 10.56 is future dollars.
Yes.
And that we're constrained when we submit March 31st to the 10.56, and all of the cost estimates are in 2022 dollars.
Correct.
Is the constraint, how are we addressing that constraint? Is the 10.56 in 2022 dollars that we submit, even if the actual number of dollars that we get for 4 years from now is something less based on inflation?
Between now and the time we submit, likely in the next couple of months, if early in the new calendar year, likely we will receive an assumed inflation rate that New Hampshire DOT calculates, which will be the basis of for all of the projects in this 10-year plan cycle, including all of their internal statewide programs. In the last 10-year plan cycle, it was 2.8%. We do expect it to go up significantly. We don't know what the final number will be yet, but you can assume it's going to go up substantially. And so we don't know what that final number is yet, but we will know what that final number is long before we submit on March, in March.
So the March 31st.
And whatever that number is what we will base the year of expenditure amount on.
Okay, so the analysis we're doing now may be greater than the number of projects that can actually go. If we look at the 10.56 in 2022, we may have to reduce that or potentially do a partial funding of a project.
Correct. If there is a project that lends itself to phasing in some way, that's something I think that we will look closely at, depending on what that final inflation rate ends up being and how much of inflation ends up eating the spending power of our regional allocation out to the year of expenditure, which is why I continued to kind of highlight in each of these projects whether they had phasing possibilities or not. It's looking at it through that lens of how can we keep moving the ball forward even if inflation eats more than we would hope in this cycle. And I think we can expect that inflation will eat more than we hope in this cycle.
Sure.
Tammy, there's some chat. Are any of those questions for Nate or?
No, everything has been addressed.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So one more thing, if I could, for those in the room online, I volunteered to offer my services on the subcommittee, but in full disclosure, I'm also an employee of VHB. I had nothing to do with any of the cost estimating or reviews. I kept myself separate from that so that I could be on the subcommittee for the review here. If anybody sees a conflict of interest and doesn't want me to participate, please let me know.
Works for me.
Works for me.
Fair enough.
Sounds like everybody's okay with it, Mark. Thank you.
Very
for
good.
that
Thank you.
clarification. Any other questions? I will yield the floor back to Jonathan.
So moving on, any other business?
I did ask Ben to do an update on the mobility management work that he's been doing lately. So I'm sure he's gonna keep this short, but
Yeah.
we do have a few people that we haven't seen before, so happy they're here, although it looks like they may have left. But certainly good to have Ben just quickly talk about that. Get out of it.
That look normal?
Yep, looks good.
All right, cool. Thanks for the introduction, Sylvia. As mentioned, this is just a quick update on mobility management the last month or two. Just a quick list of accomplishments. I've been conducting stakeholder meetings throughout the region with various transit providers, learning more about their services, as well as what the best I can do for them is, being their new mobility manager. I've done some grant support. I wrote a reference letter for Hillsborough County Meals on Wheels for their transportation RFA. I attended the CTAA Small Urban Network Conference back in August, which was held here in Manchester. Talked a lot about issues relating to transportation. Did some diversity, equity, and inclusion training. Talked a lot about recognizing unconscious bias, and this is a 6-part series, and that was the first part, so there's going to be more of this to come for me. I've been participating in RICC, TAC meetings, SEC, and the quarterly meeting with all the other mobility managers that was held in person in Concord a couple weeks ago. The RICC had been reviewing their coordinated plan, and I spent some time reviewing that as well and providing some input, updating some information. Myself and the SNHPC team created a new webpage about mobility management that has resources that kind of explain what it is, links to regional providers, at least within Region 8. And there's also tabs relating to outreach activities and contact information for me in case anybody wants to reach out to me, whether they're trying to coordinate getting a ride or if they're a representative of a stakeholder group or a transit provider and want to talk about their services with me. I wrote an article for SNHPC's quarterly newsletter, and I have been working through drafting a new newsletter for our region. That would be a quarterly newsletter as well. And recently, as in this Sunday, I attended the 2022 Londonderry Senior Expo, where I conducted a survey with attendees to learn more about what their transit needs would be if they currently can no longer drive themselves. This is just a quick overview of the draft newsletter I've been working on. Here I kind of just, put in some like placeholder articles that gives me an idea of sort of what kind of content would go here. I list out all of the regional transit providers within our region. I talk about accomplishments I've made, such as launching the new webpage for mobility management. And I talk a bit more about what I've really learned from conducting these stakeholder meetings, talking about what their needs are that need to be met, as well as any other issues that I could play a role in solving. And then I presented this newsletter to the RCC last week and got a lot of feedback. So there's still work that needs to get added here. Like I provided this data snapshot on MTA's yearly fixed ridership. And Mike Whitten was kind enough to tell me to make it clear that the big dip was COVID and not just people not riding MTA. Yeah. And also here I go a bit more into demographics throughout the region, focusing on limited English proficiency, ranking it for all the municipalities within our region. And for those of you who don't know, my region for mobility management is different than SNHPC's region. So we cover all the towns that SNHPC covers except for Francistown. Francistown is part of the Southwest region, which, if I get this right, is Region 4. But we also cover towns towards Rockingham County, which includes Raymond, Hampstead, Sandown, Danville, Atkinson, and Plastow. And on the end of every single one of these newsletters, I'll keep putting in this final page that just gives a reminder about our region, who's covered by me, as well as contact information about me and upcoming events. And more feedback I'd received from this at last week's RCC was diversifying my reporting on demographics more, so it's not just urban focused. It's easy to get urban focused when you talk about diversity, considering that Manchester is essentially the urban hub of the region and pretty much the state as well. But once this goes to the final stages of being published and being ready to send out, you'll see this be a lot more of a urban versus rural type of comparison. Next is the results from the Londonderry Senior Expo. There was only 7 questions I was asking there. I kept it as short as possible so people wouldn't feel so, turned away to fill out like a 30-minute survey. It really only took like 2 minutes per person. I had about 21 responses, both through like in person on paper, through a QR code, or through a website. So the first question, which is asking where exactly do they live? And this being held in Londonderry, it makes sense that the vast majority of responses were in Londonderry, as well as one person living in Manchester, one person living in Wyndham, and one more person refusing to disclose where he lives. Then I asked in their weekly routine where they need to go, and it would make sense that people want to go around Londonderry. Over half also need to get out to Manchester as well, Derry, and then Wyndham and Pelham. Keep in mind, these are from responses, so these are from 21 responses. So 20% of responses being the Wyndham and Pelham, that would be like 4 or 5. But also, most of these questions are allowed for multiple answers too. So there's people who like to go to Londonderry and Derry in the same week as well. So that's why samples don't add up to 100. There's just a lot of overlap in people's routines. I also asked where would they like to go, like outside of their weekly routine. And of course, Boston was the top answer for that. People also talk about going to Concord, Portsmouth, and Manchester for those who don't go to Manchester in their weekly routine. 32% wanted to go to Portsmouth. Stuck out to me the most actually, because New Hampshire really lacks in having the eastbound and westbound transportation system, mostly having to rely on demand response services and for volunteer driver programs. The majority of these responses were from seniors who still are able to drive themselves. And that's why 86% of them said that driving alone is their main mode of transportation. And for those who said that a lot of them will walk for their daily routine as well, most of them did clarify to me that they can only walk so much and their walking distance is very limited. So it's more of a leisure activity than something that helps them with their routine. Same amount of people also receive rides from relatives and friends. 14% actually still bike, and only that 5% is the one person who uses some sort of bus system as transportation. This, I believe, was the most important question, at least that I wanted to know, which was asking what level of difficulty would it be for you if you were no longer able to drive yourself, or if you currently can't drive yourself anymore, ranging from not being difficult at all the way to being very difficult. And the vast majority said that it was either difficult or very difficult for them to meet all of their weekly needs without being able to drive themselves. And it's important to remember that when asked where they need to go for the weekly routine, like 77% of responses indicated that being within Londonderry was one of those places they needed to go. Then I asked about their use of transit services, whether if they use them and if they thought about using them, and if so, why haven't they? And the most common answer was they just don't know any services. So obviously a takeaway from this is that there should be more outreach done so people can learn more about the available services in their region. Other responses included that they prefer driving alone. That's why the majority of them still drive alone. And they also are nervous to try it out, or they're unsure of how to use various services in the region. This was the question that had the highest other response, because people kind of gave their more personal reasons as to why they don't use any sort of transportation system. One person I talked to has been going through cancer treatment, and her reasoning was that she's immunocompromised and just doesn't trust using any sort of transit service that involves another person she doesn't know. And one person talked to me about how it would be difficult for them just to get to a bus station, even if they get a ride to a grocery store or to a supermarket. It'd be difficult for them to navigate and get all the items that they need for their weekly routine. So, the final question was if they do use services, what services do they use? And the highest, the most popular answer was actually the Boston Express, a whole 2-to-1 landslide. A lot of people talk about using the Boston Express to, go down to Boston stuff. And one of the previous questions when I was asking about difficulty using services, someone mentioned how they use the Boston Express, but once they even get to Boston, they find it difficult to get to where they need to go within the city as well. But these were all the services that people indicated that they use. So Boston Express had 2 responses, and then one person said they use MTA, one person said they use CART, and then one person said they use the Rockingham Meals on Wheels. So going back to the update in mobility management, I identified 2 main goals that I'll be sticking towards throughout this project. And these goals are ripped straight from the RICC coordinated plan for those who are familiar with it. My first goal is to, from the RICC, be guided and supported through facilitating implementation of a regional community transit. And when I say community transit, that means both public, nonprofit, and private transportation options, as well as improving the accessibility of these options.
And then my second goal is to maintain and encourage regional collaboration of transit providers. Because there's a lot of towns and areas within our region that are sort of dead zones for transportation services compared to other towns that have multiple services. So I would be facilitating collaboration between providers, so service can be expanded throughout the entire state and meet everybody's needs. And doing this, I'll be setting realistic objectives, goals, and benchmarks. So with all of that, there's continued tasks and future tasks ahead of me. I'll be continuously updating the webpage, putting the Londonderry survey results under the outreach part of the mobility management webpage. I hope to have the mobility management newsletter updated and finished. I'll probably have the survey results in that as well. More stakeholder meetings, more outreach activities, and so on. That's that.
All right. You can stop sharing. Any questions for Ben on his mobility management update? All right. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Well, I'm seeing we've hit that 11 o'clock hour. Anything else anyone want to chat about before you head in your own directions? Anyone online has comments? Andrew, is there anything? You're all set.
I'd just like to acknowledge, we got news yesterday that our DOT Commissioner Victoria Sheehan will be leaving New Hampshire DOT and becoming the new Executive Director of the Transportation Research Board in Washington. And I just want to thank Commissioner Sheehan for all of her partnership and support of our MPO as well as our colleagues over the last 7 years. And we will miss working with her, and we know she'll do a great job leading the TRB in the future. And, thanks to Commissioner Sheehan.
All right. I guess that's it for now. Thanks, everyone, and happy Halloween. Only 10 days away, okay? 10 days away. All right, take care.
I can't imagine how much money they spent on that. There was not one square inch.
That's, yeah, I have one there. I have one. I know. Ridiculous.